you can invite more people on.
There you go. And then that's it. Okay, so we're in. We're in. Rock and roll.
All right. There you go. You got your beans. Right, ladies and gents, welcome to the Love and Light After Dark show, Fetish for Control, presented by the House of Lords. And if you're wondering who that is, well, that's us. Myself, Carl, Marius, and EI. But I shall let them introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here and looking forward to an interesting discussion. Go on, Ian.
Good day, my fellow brethren and sisterin, all over the world, wherever you may be. This is Ihani Ngwaba, and I'm here with my colleagues and friends to indulge you and us in an understanding that's a little deeper than the average bear. So, with that being said, back over to my brother Carl. Marius, a pleasure to be on the stage with you both. Ladies, gentlemen, find yourselves a nice comfortable seat. Sit down, make sure your brews are ready to go. Make sure you've got a little something to nibble on. Maybe a little puff if that's what you're inclined. And here we go.
Excuse me, I love the professionalism by my fabulous co-hosts. I really do. Yeah, they're not usually like that. They're not usually like that. But I'm impressed. I'm impressed. So what we're going to be discussing, right, is the title of the room, which is the fetish for control and people's idea of control. And in today's world, we certainly are seeing a lot of that, isn't it? Unelected bureaucrats telling most of the world on how to conduct themselves, what they can buy, what they can't buy, what they can drive, where they can go, who they can see, and for how long. This is the nature of the world that we're living in. Not only that, though, we're also dealing with the sensitivities of control, aren't we? These individuals that are demanding that you use proper, appropriate dialect before you've even spoke to them. And you guys might as well leave yourselves unmuted. I mean, yeah. Take your wax off, come on. Let it flow.
Oh, there you go. I've got the courage to unmute.
Secondly, I was with Iani there. All day I've been kind of keeping hold of the universe's lovely green. And, I hit 10 o'clock and it's like, yep, that's it. It's my last two and I'm having I'll save them for this show.
Nice. Nice.
Just to keep me balanced, because if there isn't, then it can be all a bit, can all be a bit raw.
It can.
What do you mean by raw?
Raw, as in offensive.
Ooh,
yeah,
we like offensive.
I can be a bit just blunt, really, with the levels of intellect or lack thereof.
I think maybe the fact that it's. I think maybe the fact that people might feel offended is a little interesting, but then again, that's dependent on whether or not work has been done. And that's another direction, that's another angle that we can look at a particular point. But I don't think, I think in this day and age and in our environment, I think those that come in and listen, they'll understand that there's no offences being meant, and they'll understand that really it's just the adult dialogue that needs to take place in order to, get to the bottom of some of these quandaries we find ourselves pondering over. So, I think that the audience is also, they've got the strength, they've got the zeal, and they're adults. They know what swear words are, They're not innocent, And I think sometimes, and as long as we understand it, that it's expressed in love and in the hope that the understanding will progress them in some way, shape or form. There you go. Nothing to worry about. But then that's just me.
See, I like that because that's a theosophical approach to a situation, a lot of the time outside of the speaker's control. Right? But if you're forthcoming with who you are and you're not necessarily taking on the mantle of the anarchist or the outspoken gobshite, then you can talk about a lot of subjects. But equally, we are also seeing in the world individuals that can't process a difference of opinion, and this is what's fueling this idea of control, of people's dialect, of people's expressions, how they conduct themselves, and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's a personal construct of who you are, but at the same time, it reminds me of something Jordan Peterson once said, and it was about the nature of approved speech and approved dialect, and it's like the fact that you've made thought and expressions of thought illegal in some cases is disgusting, because to think is to run the risk of being offensive. It's a byproduct of moving beyond a pre-existing construct that somebody might have, an internalized belief structure of who they are and what they believe in. And then when somebody presents a different ideology or a different belief, we're seeing that mentality when back in our day we could have a discussion about it. We could agree to disagree and move on to the next subject. But now we seem to be living in a world where if you do not agree, then you're against me, and you're a bigot, you're this, you're that, you're this, that, and the other, which robs, like Jordan Peterson said, the opportunity for growth through our expressions of what we've been exposed to as individuals. So again, you run a risk of offence just to think within a conversation.
Well, the thing is, when you look at the fetish of control, which is I love the subject, right? When we look at the fact, like, what they keep bringing about the hate speech, right? We have to control that. It's hate speech. And then we also look at the subject of the freedom of speech. They all conflict each other. It's like, what's the freedom of speech? If hate speech is something that we have to censor it, not allow it, it's like, yeah, but you are hurting people. The thing is, well, is hate something that can be controlled by others? Is hate something that not to be allowed to express? I mean, there may be people that you hate based on what they do to you, your perception of what they do to you, because they never do it to you, but the way it's being interpreted, right? So the thing is, when we look at the subject, the fetish of control, this is what comes up. Somehow, there are certain people that would like to control what other people are allowed to speak about. Like as an example, what Carl was mentioning about his experience recently on one of the platforms. How easily you can be censored by literally sharing not just your perspective, but a perspective based on a fact that can be perceived as hate speech by the people that control this freedom of speech, which is interesting. So is it that we as humans have this fetish for control? What are you guys thinking?
Iani?
So I was just pinging some people into the room. If you feel that there are some people that would definitely benefit from this discussion, this discussion, please feel free to ping them into the room. This is our first edition of our podcast, where we just talk and it's just recorded and blah blah and what have you. So thank you very much for listening in. And what do I think about the fetish construct? Well, interestingly, okay, so the name fetish, right? So I think we came up with it because it felt as if the need for control presented by these individuals, by these groups, it's to the point where it's almost fetish-like. I mean, there's this weird kind of unique approach, incessant approach to this. The need for every facet of life, for them to have a hand in, for them to be the gatekeeper in every single facet of society, of life. So, hence the description, hence saying, well, it seems like they got a bit of a fetish for this control thing. But yes, I mean, I don't see anything other than it currently. It seems to be really pervasive. I mean, way more than one first thinks when you take it. So yes, it definitely needs discussion. It definitely needs to be looked into. Every tile, every stone must be overturned, and we're here to sort of give it some air today. So, thanks for joining us, gentlemen. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? How do we begin the dissection?
Sorry, Carl, you go on if you want. I wanted to ask Ian.
Ask the question while you're there, man.
Okay, thank you. Well, it'd be a more personal question, right? It's something that I ask myself. It's like, do you recall or ever been aware of you being the one that feels that need of control in certain situations, like in family or in your community? And what was your take from when you experienced that, and how did you feel about it?
So you're really checking for me. So you're asking me how I felt when I found myself in that position, mentally, physically, in that position to require an amount of control within the environment of my life. Is that what you're talking about? So whether it be like a family, whether it be work or something, would that be?
Well, I can say that most of us, I mean, I can talk about myself. I've been in a situation where I wasn't aware of the fact that I was actually controlling the situation to whatever my liking was or whatever I agreed with.
Right. Okay. Yes. Yeah. No. Yes. No. I have been aware of those situations. There was a time, and when I really think back, yes, as a young lad trying to make his way, I definitely utilised the advantage that I might have found myself to have in order for me to sway meetings, conversations, these types of things. I felt the need to not leave anything to chance, because my desire was to attain a certain goal and attain a certain destination and achieve a certain goal, right? And I was very single-minded about that, and I was prepared to engage on every facet that I thought I needed to engage on in order to secure that. So yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I can't deny and say I've never had that feeling in my life, and so no, I think it's an alien scenario. No, definitely not. And how I felt great at the time. I must admit, at the time I felt great. I felt like this is important. I felt, I suppose...
You felt powerful?
I suppose it was the artificial start of societal power, right? I say artificial start because I'm aware of what that power is or is not, and that to me isn't power. But back then, maybe I didn't see it as power, but I saw it as definitely some sort of juice that I could use, some sort of tool in my pocket that had a bit of weight to it, you know. And I finessed the situation to my liking, because when you are engaged in that type of pursuit, those are the attributes that first come into play. And I was young, so the maturity I hadn't really seen the world yet. I was already trying to make moves in my own city, right? I hadn't really seen the world in the bigger prospect, so in the bigger aspect. So I wouldn't have been aware I wouldn't have been aware of the fundamental aspect of me needing to control something. I would have just, again, like I was just using it as, okay, I've got this in the bag. You know, you don't think of it as control. You think of it as just your actions, your process. You never really look at it as control until later on when a guy named Marius come and ask you that question pertinently in front of people, and you have to answer him. So yeah, thanks.
I love the way you did that. I love the way you did that. It got me thinking about the same question, sort of like presented it myself. You know, that idea of control, and there is this phase that certainly young men go through, especially young men in built-up cosmopolitan areas. There's that tribal thing. There's the pubescent who's hard, and you look for dominance in your little tribe or your social group. No matter how that presents itself, you know, through physical dominance, through mental dominance, confidence and stuff like that can all be construed as a fetish of control in a sense, because you're manipulating the environment to your own maniacal needs, whatever that may be. And there's certainly been times in my life, and I put my hand up just like Iani, you know, where I've been the proverbial tyrant, I suppose, orchestrating, manipulating things to suit what I want. But there is that, I say there is, there are those that go through a maturity phase where they begin to see the folly and the illusionary, which was a fabulous point, the illusionary aspect of this idea of control. And I dare say it's something that spilled off into my grown-up life, but in another way. And in this sense, it's this idea of not being controlled by people that I don't know and never met, but they seem to have this idea that they can dictate on how I conduct myself in my life. And I suppose in this way, it's a fetish of my own control and my own desires and my own output, that I want to do it this way. I'm not listening to you. I don't know you. You have no interest in my life. You have no interactions in my life. In fact, most of these individuals live abroad for all intents and purposes, but believe that they know what's best for people. But yeah, hand on heart, you know, there are times where I've implemented some kind of force to manipulate a situation to my own output, and there's certainly been countless arguments, you know, where you take your position and you feel like you're right and the other person is wrong. But over time, like I said, with this maturity process, with the introspection of your own output, you know, realizing that you are the toxicity in your own life, that you end up stepping out the way. And that idea of control now is a fractal. It's a woohoo. It's a wagazi. You know, it's a fahuzi. It's nothing. It's illusionary. But all at the same time, you know, you're very aware that bandwidth of expression where other people believe that they know what's best for you is a form of psychological control, some kind of psychological fetish to have people do what these individuals want. You know, whilst I might add the double standard, they're still doing exactly what you're doing that they're telling you not to do because it may be bad, but yet they're immersed right up to the eyeballs in it. And it's that double standard where the idea of taking one's sovereignty back in a situation was paramount for me. You know, once you go through that evolutionary process where you're growing up and you're very much living through the ego, you're very much living through that shell identity of what people may presume of you, what they think of you, and what you may think of yourself. You know, are you the weak individual in the group? Are you the assertive person in the group? Or whatever the case may be, there does come a point for some, I can't say all, but for some, where they begin to turn that gaze inwardly, and then they can see the expressions of people that want control, that want a particular environment, that want things to go a particular way. And yeah, I'm no longer emotionally affected by these individuals. You know, it is just what it is, just the utterances of consciousness experiencing itself objectively through the illusionary eye that they have some illusionary power over others. And I don't play that game either.
It's interesting when we look at control in general, right? Like from the three of us being parents, right? How many times have we exercised our power of control over our children? You know, I had to ask myself, why can't I just allow my child to experience and, you know, observe and then have a discussion? Well, for a long time, I wasn't in that position. I wasn't aware. Some may say, like, when you're asleep. Well, asleep. But then you slowly start to become more open up to information where it challenges all that need for control from a consciousness point of view. It's like, well, it's consciousness, you know, exploring itself. So as parents, we can say that we've been programmed by our parents because that's how we've been brought up, and their parents programmed our parents because that's how they've been brought up, and then we just passing it on. Then it gets to a point where we are right now, where we start to see that this fetish for control kind of pushes us into a corner, because it allows the ones that really wants to take that control of the world to implement whatever their beliefs are. And then all of a sudden, people are starting to realize, hold on a second, that's a lot of control here. But how do we translate that to people to look within and find out that even ourselves, I'm somewhat part of that, because we weren't aware of it. We just gave in without knowing what we're doing, literally. I mean, when you're asleep, you don't know what you're doing. You're just asleep. Go on, Nihan.
I was just going to interject and just add a little bit to what you're saying and say, well, did we just go ahead and have really no apparent understanding of what we were doing, or did we actually attempt to actually be present? But our efforts were very junior, very amateur. Would that account for that first initial stage in what you're describing?
Well, it's interesting you brought that point. It's a possibility. When we say we, well, who's we? Carl will probably quickly ask, who's we? Well, some of us, or most of us, but not all of us, there's been people throughout generations that they've been aware of this and try to, you know, translate that to the masses. So far, we here can agree, probably, or maybe not, that we are at that point where more and more people are becoming aware of it. Right? So now how do we increase that message, or how do we go about to get more people aware of it? And that fetish for control, that need for control, it's nothing but something that we are doing it to ourselves.
But it's done against the backdrop of a very precisely mapped out environment construct. It's done against the backdrop of this particular society, Western society, wherever you currently live. If you live in a city, if you're part of a situation where you're supposed to be paying tax or whatever it happens to be, that's the part I'm talking about. It's a very metered out, structured, and ruled environment. So this is what anybody, this is what a human has to reference as they navigate. unless they were born outside of that system. So if they were part of the Shua and the Amazon or something like this, then that wouldn't relate to them.
So am I right in saying that what you're referring to is society's press on its community to conform and conduct themselves in a particular way, because those subtle nuances are different from continent to continent? Is that what you're getting?
Yes.
Well, that again is a funny notion, because for a long time, basic rules of human decency were the order of the day. And we didn't need rules to tell us how to be a decent human being. There was modalities and behavioural patterns that kind of managed men and their barbarism. Men, if didn't agree back in the day, the penultimate was conflict. So it was in man's best interest, really, to find some level of agreement, because both parties are very much aware that this could end in a physical conflict. Where, when we're talking about the kind of earlier rules on how society should conduct itself, they were very aware of the innate nature of men and women and how communities conducted themselves. You always, it's a strong word, but it is a human compunction. It has a penchant for categorizing itself and finding its own kind of hierarchical system. Those that can do good and those that are good at something else. They're brought to the front. But now with these mega metropolises and a world where so many are offended because they lack the subtle nuances to be able to accept that there are others in the world that grew up with a very different set of rules, and they don't see the world in the way that they see it. So now, because of this gathering of peoples from all corners of the globe, we are seeing more and more rules, more and more laws governing the expressions of people, as opposed to a focused push to develop people from those more archaic attributes of insecurity and self-doubt. The moment you start to bolster and nurture an individual's confidence about what they're thinking, how they're expressing themselves, they begin to lose sight of the draconian oversight, because they understand the dynamics of how people operate. But now, like I aforementioned, you've got rules saying that you can't hate, and this was something that came up earlier on. It's a human emotion, no different than love, no different than laughter or joy. It's a human emotion. In some cases, it's a very deep, ingrained emotion. And with these new laws saying that, hate speech or anything that can be construed as hateful or somebody could take offence, you now can be prosecuted. And for me, that's just a step too far. Fundamentally, I think that's just a step too far. Right? Because the victim of a rapist has the right to hate. The victim of child abuse has the right to hate. And they have the right to express that disdain for their individual. But now we're seeing laws that are protecting those that do such crimes, and that you can't talk about it. So the culprit of the crime is protected through legal speech. And those that bring it to the fore, that to talk about, their pain, their suffering, their hardships, to what this aggressor did, they would be construed as the villain. They would be the ones that get cancelled. They were the ones that would lose their job because they dared to talk about the tyrant. And that's because of this idea of control. Now, we can't have people getting upset. Well, why don't you teach them the moral fibre so they can handle somebody not agreeing with them? That would be a good start.
So what comes up, Carl, is the more rules are being created, the more we complicate it for ourselves, and we taking our freedom of speech away, and we implement control, more and more control onto ourselves, and take us away from the universal laws that back in the day were more in line with. I don't know. This is something that just came up as you were sharing.
Is it because could it be because we feel this need, could it be simply the fact that we haven't really found our way inward as one, and so thus are pushing out the responsibility, outsourcing the responsibility to some sort of a societal dynamic, parenting, management, trying to think of sort of attributes of our society that would sort of deal with control. Is it because we have the ability to think and we don't instinctively operate as the rest of the animal kingdom? Does the fact that we can pause before we make a move, does that dictate us requiring some element of control? Or should I say us desiring some element of control? Control not of anything else, but control of ourselves.
That's just a fabulous point, and I'm so glad you brought it up, because I was sat there listening to you, and I kind of got to where you were going a couple of seconds before you got there. And that's kind of right, isn't it? The onus of control is on you, the individual, and your actions. And unfortunately, because people are lacking self-control and a certain amount of emotional maturity, that instead of them actually doing the work inwardly, they're expecting society to adjust to their inaction. And I could certainly surmise that therein lies the problem. That society now is being constructed to suit the least among us, which and I don't mean that in a worthy sense. I'm on about the least capable. The individuals that aren't that bright, and that's not offensive because they exist. Each and every one of us here knows somebody that isn't that bright. A Divvy Darren or a Special Sarah. Right? But now we live in a world of inclusion where Divvy Darren, right, can go onto the building site, and Divvy Darren's got to wear a high-vis jacket, goggles, safety boots, and he's got to wear everything. He's got to be strapped to his ladder, right? Where earlier on in our future, and not that long ago, your safety was your responsibility. And the moment we took that away and put forward a system where now you can sue, for whatever reason, it's like people became more stupid. And I'm going to say that unashamedly. It's like, oh, well, if I trip over this ladder, I'm just going to sue. I'm just going to sue. Because where back in my day, where if you fell off the ladder, you was an idiot and don't do it again. And because of that environment, people were a lot more aware of their environment and the things that they were doing, because they understood that there was a risk of harm. And now we have a society where, like I said, it's suited for the least among us, kind of cognitively, and because of such, that set the bar. And now you have this ism where the likes of individuals and beautiful audio voyeurs down in the listener section, they're very aware of these kind of steps backwards. And Iana, you mentioned something earlier on about, we're kind of going backwards. If we set the standard for the least capable among us, then you're slowing the efficiency of those up above that are really efficient at their craft. And they can shoot up a ladder. And I'll give you an example. When I first came out of the military, I went to go for a job as a decorator, right? I went to the job centre to apply for this job. And they turned around and said, have you got a health and safety certificate? I said, what for? They said, because you've got to go up a ladder. And I went nuts. I did, again, here's that insight of self-control. And at that time, there clearly wasn't any. And I spat my dummy out. I really did. 6 months prior to that, I was abseiling out the back of a Chinook helicopter. And now I've got this limp-wristed fucking special Jackie that was working in the job centre that said, no, you need a health and safety to go up the ladder. You know, it's an affront to people that have done the work. So if you set a society whose standard is for those least among us, and we see it through our broadcasting, we see it through our programming, even intellectual programs, parliamentary question time or whatever it is, it's structured in a manner so Special Sarah and Divvy Darren can understand. So after a period of time, you sort of like turn off the television and social media and you go away for a few months and then turn it back on, you realise that they're talking to everybody like they're a simpleton. And then when you do have conversations like this, where you're exploring the paradigms and you have to highlight the differences between people, those that are unfortunately at the bottom run get offended. And those that are more than capable are the ones that are being chastised for it. And I think it's a damning place for humanity, and it's a damning place for the development of the species.
You know, it comes, it's interesting, this concept that the more we create a sort of protection, whatever that protection may be, for depending on each and every single one of us, the more we see in the society, and what I've observed, I don't know about you guys, but the more sensitive people become. It's just that kind of protection, illusion of protection. Let's put it for what it is. That illusion of protection that they've been given by these laws, because it is an illusion. In real life, no matter what laws are there, if you're gonna meet with someone that is mentally ill or whatever and goes nuts and attacks you, he can kill you, and the law cannot protect you. It's just as simple as that. We observe this sensitivity that it's showing up in the new generations. Like, they're so sensitive of anything that is being said. And that's not in all of them. A majority of them, or probably not even a majority, because if you I look at my daughter, for example, she's 14, right? And we have more of a discussions of what's happening at school and how the children are. And we see that more and more children are kind of starting to speak up about even the fact about the gender situation. That's another fetish of control, right? How many genders
you
are
went
there?
now.
I did, didn't I? I did.
Yes,
All right, well,
it is. And before you go all the way there, just quickly hold that thought and let's quickly have a word with our sponsors. And also, I'd like to welcome those of you who have just tuned in. This is the After Dark Love and Light show. You are with the House of Lords, and may I introduce them to you. That is Carl, Marius, and Ihani. And we are the House of Lords. And today we have a conversation about fetish for control. Marius, please go ahead with your point and then we can continue on.
Thank you, Henry. Yeah, so I can hear from my daughter she say that more and more children, standing up for, I'm a girl, I'm a boy, end of the story, right? And we look at it, and those are the children that, when I look at my daughter, how sensitive she was a couple of years back as we went through certain challenges because of the way the education system, I'm going to go there as well, presented all this gender thing to the kids and got my daughter into a confusion of the mind of, is she a girl, is she a boy, all those things, and we had to have different discussion. I had to pay attention to the books that she brings from school, and I've noticed certain books that they were pushing this kind of gender thing and relationship with boy, girl with girl, and you name it. Which, listen, when you get to that certain age where you know exactly what you're doing, that's fair enough. But to confuse the children that at this early age of development about what gender they are, it's just completely out of order. And it shows that this is a level of control that those call them entities, have over our educational system, for example, right? How it's been infiltrated, and at the same time infiltrated to that kind of a level where they can really share this in schools without parents knowing. Now, I can say, well, that's not fair. I wasn't made aware of it. Now, yeah, I can say that. But how much have I actually looked into it myself as a parent to become more aware? I have to look at myself as well, right? How much did I give that control to them by not being involved as much with the school? So can I blame them completely? No. I have to understand, where am I standing in this situation, and how I could have not take control, but be more involved in the education of my daughter. So to get back to the point is to see how this sensitivity that is being portrayed and is being painted over the social media apps. Even the fact that, well, men should cry more often. That's not a should. I mean, men can cry. No one says that men don't cry. I can't say that I never cried. Okay, we don't cry in front of others. Now we're being told, oh, you should cry in front of everyone. Well, if you think about the fact that how men are being perceived as the protector of the family, do you really want to be painting that picture that you are so sometimes in that place where you need to release that stress, depending on what situation that crime happens over? It may be over injury that without you want it, it's going to bring some tears out. But it can be something else that may affect you mentally. It may affect me mentally, that I need that stress release to let the tears come out. Now, do you as a man want to make your family feel that you're not capable of protecting them, that you are so sensitive? No, yeah, that's the way we've been brought up in a way, right? Go on, Henny.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is...
Come to your mic.
See, what comes to... Sorry about that, gentlemen. What comes to mind here, as you talk of the sensitivity, right? I say to myself, okay, when I was growing up, sensitivity was displayed by those cool women, the elders, the women who they just knew what's up, and it was displayed at the right time, at the right moment, for the right reason. Okay? And there was enough of it to go round, and I didn't feel as if there wasn't enough in the world. Men weren't doing that. The men were marching forward. Yeah, go on, boys. If you fell over in front of your dad or something, you didn't hear him come running after you. Hey, you all right, son? Your dad just silent, waiting for you to get up. And then once you've got up, he probably just quietly says to himself, there you go. That's it. Back in the day, it was more that. It was more like that back in the day. When I was a child, right, I learnt to ride a bike on concrete. I learnt to ride a bike on the pavement. No grass, no training wheels, no somebody running with the bike behind me, none of that. No, I learnt on concrete. Downhill. Balance, man. It's balance and speed. You just get it all in. When you crash, man. That's it. Boom, you get up again. You start again. Eventually you're riding. You're fine. No helmet. No elbow things. But if you breed an environment where the first thing you say is you are incapable of learning how to do this without injuring yourself, so to defend, to prevent this happening, we are going to protect you. Now, this is for male, female, it doesn't matter. This is humanity. So this is what I'm dealing with here right now. Right? But we to build, now if you can look around different societies and you'll see where this has been something that has strangely been pushed, but yet when you take an even closer look, it makes no sense. For example, when I think about England in comparison to here, England in comparison to US, right? England, no training wheels, no helmets for the kids, just riding. But here, that was it. That was the big thing. So I thought, okay, they're overprotective, right? Overprotective. Why is that? Is it because you want to protect your children? Is it because the children have demanded that they needed to be protected? Now, on the outside, that makes perfect sense. You're like, oh, well done. Yeah, well done. Got the kids. But, of late, information comes along where that might actually not be the case. So if that's the case, so if on the one hand you're saying, yes, protect the child, but on the other hand you're doing things that do not protect children, what is it? Is that see, when we say fetish for control, need for control is one thing, but controlling things at random, things that you're only interested in and the rest of it you forget. To me, that's what I feel comes up more when we discuss this. So I just wanted to throw that in before you carry on. What are your thoughts?
See, again, you put a few forward there, and where we could go with that is practically anywhere. One is the innate nature of the masculine and the feminine. And what I mean by that is the male and the female. Back in the day, they were more robust. Mother was the caregiver. She was the plaster lady. She was the cold tissue on a knot on your head because you banged your head playing stone fights in the park. And you rightly put it out there as well. The father would watch you fall, and he would love through disciplinarian. He'd watch you fall and come over, in this case, and like, don't do that. You hurt yourself. Yeah, well, don't do it again. Go on, off you go. Where mum would come along and she'd get the wipes, she'd get the tissue, and she'd rub and this, that, and the other. And it was the different modalities. But can we explore, the much bigger picture? Now, that family dynamic has been shattered fundamentally through cost of living. We go back to our childhood. My stepfather could support the family. We could go on holiday, and there was a few of us, and that was all right. There was mum there, dad was the disciplinarian, and so on and so forth. Yep. But now we have a society where everything costs an excruciating amount. So both mother and father are at work. The state, in some weird, perverted way, has taken ownership of the child and constructed this nanny state, which is sterile, and young men learn through their knocks. They learn through their hardships. We grew up in playgrounds, and I'm not speaking for myself here. I dare say the gentleman up on stage with me as well agreed. We grew up in a playground with slides that stood about 20 feet tall that just basically was concrete underneath. These tall, narrow death traps of a slide that would melt your skin off in the summer and chuck you so fast off the end in the winter that you'd lose the arse in your jeans. There was no rubber matting. We had those rocking horse things in the in some parks. It's like a battering ram from medieval times, and if you stood in front of that, you're going to the hospital because you broke something. The roundabouts that would pick up 30 mile an hour speed, and we as children would just grab a bar and see who could hold on. But all of those kind of hard knocks have gone. It's a lot more sterile. Nobody can say nothing. Back in the day, if you got caught misbehaving by an individual or a grown-up on the estate, that person would give you a clip round the ear and then take you home. And then you get a shoe in at home, 1 for being caught and 2 for getting a clip round the ear off a stranger. But again, now it's like, well, you're doing to my child, you can't do that to my child. There's no repercussions, and like we mentioned earlier on, you remove the repercussions for stupidity, then you're actually supporting stupidity. You're actually creating a safe place for people to be stupid. and not be accountable for the decisions that they're making. So it's, on one hand, it's all good and well, you know, as parents, you know, saying, well, you should do this, you should do that. I'm far from infallible as a parent. I've made my mistakes as a parent, and I'm sure if anybody was honest with themselves, they'd admit it themselves. But there is that crossover period for those that have adult children now where, you know, you have the rule book, the parent rule book, and this is how it goes, you know, in at this time, no, your boyfriend's not staying, etc. And then it gets to that age where you kind of got to let go of those reins to see if you've done the work well enough. And then you've got to allow them to make their own mistakes. But again, like I said, we seem to now have a nanny culture that is constantly catching and supporting everybody and said, it's okay, you know, everything's okay, it's all right, it's not your fault. And sometimes it is. And I'll be that person. Sometimes it is your fault. You made a stupid decision, you did something wrong, and you should be told. Instead of sort of like this wrapped up in cotton wool. It's all right, Tommy. It's all right, don't worry. I know you didn't know the kettle was off because, you know, you're 16 now. And I mean, it's a bizarre world, especially in the nature of what I do, mentoring and training young adults. The young adults that I grew up with, we were all very adept in the use of the iron, the washing machine, the locks, the jobs, the household chores, and the responsibilities and the repercussions if they weren't followed through.
Yep.
Now we have a culture and a safe place where Marius touched upon it. You know, this idea that a child can tell a stranger to the family unit, which would be in this case the teacher or some social worker, that they're confused, and it's okay. It's okay. Do you feel X, Y, Z, or the other? Okay. Well, what we can do, we can get you on hormone tablets, we can get you on puberty blockers, and this, that, and the other. And we don't need to tell your parents. The moment that became the norm, was totally installing into the youth that the parents have no authority. It's completely the government state on what is and what can be done and what can't be done. But here's another parallel. Here's another kind of proxymoron. Right? So all of that kind of rough and tumble behaviour now is frowned upon that we grew up with. And everywhere's a safe place, and you can't use no dialect that nobody can be offended by, right? To the point that if somebody is offended by something that you've said, it is an arrestable offence because it's deemed violent. And if you had my childhood, somebody calling you a harsh word or something that may have upset you is far removed from violence. I know the difference. But that line's been blurred now. It's psychological violence. Shut up. But the point I'm getting at, where I'm going with this, is the moment the child is given kind of that safe space for no accountability for their actions, is supporting the finger pointing of the opening conversation that we had when we first come in, which is one of accountability for your actions. And I could certainly say that this is fueling that soft mentality. A few years ago, George Carling, he's dead now, bless him, rest his soul, right? But he came up with this skit about the pussification of men. And it's a strong term. But the pussification of men. And that's kind of what we're seeing. You know, infamously, some Gen Zer that was doing the rounds on social media about this idea of a national draft, and he was very flamboyant. I don't know what you lot are talking about. This idea that I'm going to be recruited to go into the army. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not doing that, you know. And it's that whole mentality of detachment, because they're in a world now where they can express themselves to the point where it's offensive, but there's no repercussions for the offence that they are causing. So therefore, they can go round uttering this nonsense and think it's socially acceptable. And anybody that's rebutting that of older years, saying, you carry on talking like that, I'm going to slap you, they're the ones in the wrong. Because we grew up in an environment where if you did something wrong, if you did not respect your elders within reason, you know, you were going to get slapped. There was repercussions for your actions.
And it wasn't seen as abuse.
No, it wasn't.
No.
No, it wasn't. But I landed there.
No, it wasn't abuse. It was the way in which that type of behaviour, that type of self-management, community self-management, allowed people to come and go as they pleased, allowed the front doors to be open and never locked, allowed the elderly to come home from bingo in couples by themselves late at night, knowing that nothing was going to happen to them. Why? Because the neighbourhood looked after itself. Policing was easy. The police knew the community. They knew the cops as they walked the beat. We knew them. What's changed? It would appear there's been an emphasis from above that says that's not good enough. It would appear that there's an emphasis from above that requires a deeper, a far more intrusive approach to the understanding of what it means to control a community, a state, what have you. Even though these things were in place when we were younger, you can tell that there was far more freedom. You know, today today a child could not call the police station and have 2 police officers arrive at the child's house to help and assist the child look for a lost Lego piece. That just doesn't happen anymore. But it did. When I was a child, I made that phone call and they came. So you see the difference in where we are right now. Hence the title, Fetish for Control. I feel as if those that seek to have it, those that have forced it for such a while, it doesn't seem to be like the ordinary, well, you know, this is what we need to do in order for things to work out. No, it definitely seems to be a very strange relationship with it, with the need for it, and hence the reason for our conversation today. We want to thank you all for listening in. This is our first go around at creating a podcast, just a simple podcast. But we wanted to thank you for that, and I wanted to hand you back off to the gents right here and see what they thought of my previous comment.
Go on, Marius, go ahead.
Go.
It's just the idea of control, isn't it? You're kind of onto something there, isn't it? Really, you know, with this idea of the more kind of rules, the more dictation on how we should do, the more fragmented and vulnerable society is becoming. And you're right to make the distinction between the youth, you know, that like them or loathe them back in the day, you know, you had your good ones and you had your bad ones, but you knew them by name, and what I mean by them is the police. You know, you knew them by name. They generally walked through the estate or the streets. You had your beat Bobby. But now the police service is like a bushfire service, constantly kind of, there's no room for public relations, you know, it's just all hands on deck going from one bushfire to another. You know, there's no coercion between society and the establishment in that way, especially on the streets. But the point I was going to make earlier on, one on education, you know, all of the things that we used to do are fundamentally not allowed to do anymore. And to the point where it's so kind of heavy on its control of expression and how you go about doing things that you can't hardly say anything without somebody being offended. And then you look at the entertainment business, music, movies, and such. Now, all the individuals in the movies, you know, they're all extra hard. They're either gangsters or shootings. We see rape and murder constantly perpetuated in movies. You hear songs that are thrust into like the top 10s and constantly on the radios, and they're all vacuous fundamentally. You know, there's a lot of vacuous stuff in there, a lot of hateful and misogyny and sexism, and you name it, it's all there. And these are the idols that these people, general society are looking up to. But everything that's going on in these movies and these songs is illegal in real world. So it's like the systems created a system that installs the behaviour patterns that fill the prisons that benefit the system in the first place. So at what point does it become responsible, as Iani put, for us as individuals to take accountability for our actions? And it's a bizarre thing. It really is. And I just wanted to quickly address some points in the chat as well. There's been a few comments in there. One was talking about the more rules, the sketchier society's becoming. And equally, somebody mentioned about, I think it was you, Max, mentioned about crying and everything else like that. There's no shame in it. I'm the first one. I cry for. There ain't much on TV with a soppy ending or a heartfelt story that I won't blub at. I just can't help myself. It just comes out, right? To the point, it's a joke. I'll have the missus turn round. I'll have relatives turn round when there's a soppy bit or a sad bit, and it doesn't have to be like sad as in what we'd perceive as sad, a sad thing. It could be a wonderful thing that came from a wonderful place, and I'll start to cry because of the nature of it being wonderful. That very attachment with the expressions and the emotions and everything else. But again,
I agree with you, Carl. The one crying that I was talking about,
Teddy bear.
Come on, teddy bear. The crying that I was mentioning when I was addressing that is the fact that this is being pushed in a way in the social media where they created groups with men going and hugging and crying, like where you mentioned about the pacification of men, making it in such a way that it's like that movement of, am I a man or am I a woman? I'm crying. Probably I'm a woman. I know. As a man, I can cry too. So it creates that confusion that men can't even identify as men in today's world, as it used to be back in the day, whatever we've seen. And so that's the one I was mentioning. I'm not saying that crying in front of someone else it's a shame. It's not a shame. Of course, I agree with what was mentioned in the chat. It's also a strength, to be able to express the emotion when it comes, I wouldn't say organic, naturally, right? When it's natural, that's a different story. But to start to create that movement where, man should cry more often. Man should. I mean, this is what I was addressing, Carl. Go on, back to you.
No, I've got no taker on that. Go on, Ioni.
I was going to quickly say, so is that not a demonstration of yet another mechanism of control? And are we not now really identifying the levels, the many tendons that seem to pervade, seem to enter, invade, and lodge in so many facets of what we are doing? And is there genuinely a need for it? I mean, what are the benefits of a few people attaining this high level of control? If there are no benefits, then what is our response in understanding that and then putting ourselves in a position of a neutral standpoint? Because remember, we're not trying to flash over to one side or another, are we? We're just trying to come out from underneath that, so that then we can just express. So I'm curious on your thoughts, gents.
Again, you're on fire tonight, Yanni. You really are. There is that approach of the macrocosm, isn't there? You know, systems upon systems, stacked as you put it. And how and what would be their influences? What would be the reasons for some kind of maniacal leader of the tribe? Now, like I mentioned earlier on, I brought forward the point earlier on, human beings have an innate ability to compartmentalize them and structure themselves into some hierarchical system, just by the personality types that are inherent in the human species. You know, we look at the work environment. There's points where you have to sequender. You know, you have to hand over control to somebody else. They may be more learned, they may more insightful of the process of the work that is being done. So therefore, there is a level of systems, you know, hierarchical systems as you go up. Systems managing systems. The military's no different. You know, you have your private right up to your warrant officer class 2s or your regimental commanders. Each one of them have a field of influence to manage what's underneath. So if we look back in history, you know, has that always been the case? Has there always been this kind of hierarchical system of those achieving vast amounts of social clout? So they are appointed positions of authority, so they can conduct the systems underneath, the mechanisms underneath. It is a profound question, you know, just like handling traffic. You know, it's a form of control, red light, green light, blue light, whatever it is. It's all systems within systems. And I suppose at what point, and I like the way you put that, you know, do we step from underneath these systems and have a look at them for what they are? Mechanisms to operate a particular system within society. So to step out from underneath this idea of control is to be able to take that field marshal's view at the complexity of society and how people govern themselves. You know, a lot of us are products of our upbringings, products of our environments, products of our social dynamics, from personal, situational, environmental, universals, and spiritual dynamics. You know, all of these constructs are programs that we've inherited from our peers. And I suppose what we're exploring here, at what point do you take ownership and start to navigate your own directions and the strength of character, I suppose, to adhere to and refuse to adhere to various rules. You know, those that make sense, some that don't. You know, I seldomly listen to particular health and safety rules when it comes to doing various jobs, because I've been doing them for years. You can kind of do them with your eyes shut. It's like driving. There's all these rules that you have to learn, all these signs that you have to interpret and digest. But the moment you get that license, after a couple of years, it's almost autopilot. You can go from one end of the country to the other, thinking about what you're doing next week, thinking about shopping, thinking about your love life, thinking about the past, whatever it may be, and then all of a sudden you're at your destination. And there wasn't no real conscious effort into getting there. It's a response. And once you understand the mechanisms, just like driving, it allows you and gives you the freedom to start contemplating other matters. But if you're constantly adhering to controls, adhering to ideologies that suit others and not are applicable to the best interests of what you want for your life, then that system of control then becomes oppressive. But again, it's a paradoxical situation, because those that find comfort within that role, because they don't have the bandwidth of character or the experience to move beyond it, you know, ridicule those that don't need that kind of oversight and control. Oh, you're not conforming, you're not a team player. Well, maybe you're an idiot. You know, it's maybe you need that. I don't. I understand the rules of the game, and this is that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and I know where we're going from point A to point B, and I know the steps that need to go in there, so I don't need that oversight breathing down my neck to make sure I can do it. But there are some that have asked. You know, they go to council meetings, they go to the town hall and say something must be done about the zebra crossing, then something must be done about the bus stop that's just outside of the shop, because at 3 o'clock it's a nightmare to get on the bus. Constantly looking for convenience, for comfort within their own existence. And to exist, you have to be prepared to be made uncomfortable. It's a human impunction. You know, you go back to, believe it or not, you know, whatever your preference may be, that Darwinian process of evolution, survival of the fittest. You know, for thousands of years, people that survived were the people that could hunt, kill, and fight. Or if they didn't do those, they knew others that did, and they could maybe make something, they could build, they could do this. And there was this partnership, you see, people utilising other people's skills. And then you move into kind of the industrial era, where that survival aspect is then taken away, because we're no longer fighting the grizzly bears and the saber-toothed tigers and the wolves, right? Now we're cultured in an environment where it doesn't have to be the survival of the fittest anymore, because, you know, the layperson can come along and they can achieve just as much because it's all safe. Which making life very frigging toxic for other peoples that have transcended the modalities of the first steps of human comprehension. So we have a society that's constructed on one size fits all, and unfortunately we've all got different size fucking feet. So it's not applicable. But even to have these conversations in earshot of various officials would concede you as a free radical. You are the anarchist, you are the conspiracy theorist, you are chauvinistic, or you're an opinionated male, you've got toxic masculinity, and all these other kind of notions. So yeah, I suppose that's where I'd come in at that, Iani, you know, being able to look at the macrocosm onto itself, the different tiers of control that construct society and onto itself.
So one of the things I then comes to mind as we say, as you were speaking, and what becomes apparent is that the fetish is on both sides. The fetish is on the side of those that assume control and those that require the need to be controlled.
I wanted a big buzzer there, just to go bingo. Bang on the man. Mary? What's your idea on this notion that control, or the fetish control, is a pendulum? It swings both ways, you know, from those that are wanting to move forward and create a society where we can move unimpeded, or those that are requiring the rules to help them cross the road. You know, it's a two-way door. What's your take on that?
What's my take? It's interesting. As you said, it's a two-way door, which is interesting, right? It's the same like when we talk about the subject of borders. We have to build a wall to protect ourselves. I'm like, yeah, but that wall works both ways, right? It's the same thing. Now, you may protect yourself, but at the same time, you may imprison yourself. You know, that's how it comes up. And you mentioned something interesting, Carl, about the survival of the fittest. Isn't it interesting that even when we were living on, well, not we, as we are alive today, but our ancestors, when they lived in those times, in the survival of the fittest, exactly as you said, Carl, they knew how to collaborate, because not everyone was built to go hunting. They were all trained, but some were better than others, depending on what they liked. Some liked to cook, some liked other things, some liked to build. But there was a mutual understanding within the community, how they collaborate and build the community, right? Which in today's world, it's disappearing. And the question is why? What's creating all of this? What it's making us to disconnect from each other in such a way that we do not understand that we all have different qualities. We all have different way of experience life. We all have different likes. Well, not the likes that we see with Facebook and Instagram, but we like different things, right? And it feels like it's this, well, I'll call it as it comes. It's trying to look at a nicer word. I don't know why. It's interesting. But it looks like these weak people are like, well, we want to make sure we definitely protect it. And we have to have something to control those strong ones, because otherwise we're in danger. And it feels like it's sort of like this mental illness, where you create a scenario that you are in danger where you're not, and then you'll put up all the kind of scenarios to come up with all sorts of rules that is really affecting the entire society, whatever that society is, or you can say globally, in a way. Not everywhere, but most places that have been, modernized and industrialized and some westernized. This is how it appears. It appears like there is that sort of fear. It comes from a place of fear. This fetish of control. I don't know what you guys think of that.
So what would be the fear? The fear of none?
The fear of being overtaken. The fear of being second. The fear of not having your hand on every resource. The fear of not being first to choose what resource you would like. The fear of being in competition with the everyday person who may well happen to be stronger and more agile in that particular plane. Hence, the reason for the artificial control. It's demonstrated regularly on that level. There was a little scene in Gladiator with Russell Crowe, and Joaquin Phoenix plays one of the Caesars. And just before, he challenges the mighty gladiator to a duel. He's like, all right then, I'll take you on, mate. Just before they're about to break out and do this fight to fight, he comes up to him, says something, and stabs him in the side right there, just to weaken him. So now the Caesar feels like he's got strength and he can win this fight. You see, there's always a fear that they might lose. So if you can control a situation, if you can manipulate an environment to a point where the cushion that you have between your failure, between your poverty and everything else is as broad as it can possibly be. Yes, and Maris is 100% correct. It does stem from fear of having nothing, fear of being normal, fear of being average, if that's what you want to call it, fear of just being mortal. Maybe somebody's convinced them that they're gods. Maybe they know they're not because they keep on bleeding. And so maybe that fear is quite, incredible. I mean, when you think about it, look at these people that were doing, look at the back in the day stock exchange, in the financial sector. People have a crazy year, like they lose millions in the stock exchange, and they're committing suicide. And you have to consider, why is that? What made them do that? You're pushing money about. Whose money? Well, what was it? You were pushing a gangster's money around? So, then they told you that if you lost it, you may as well kill yourself, and then the financial crash happens. It's just something to consider. Definitely something to consider. But no, the fear, I think it's the fear that comes from them not having much. They don't want to have to struggle. The fear of not suffering. or the fear of suffering.
So would it not be prudent then to teach people to master this idea of self-generated fear, as opposed to structuring society to compensate for it?
But if you're using that dynamic of fear as a methodology, as a use within your governance of that society, then what? You're not the one thing you're trying to you would expect to master. In fact, you've mastered it, but you've mastered it in a way by projecting it on everybody else. You haven't mastered it within yourself, right? So up until that point, you appear to be the strong one. Or in actual fact, you're not. Because those that you're now projecting that fear on, they're getting used to it. They're experiencing it. It's a big difference. Projecting it and experiencing it are two different things. So yes, this fetish for control comes from their need to avoid any type of confrontation, show any type of weakness, and be at the hand of any loss to any mere mortal.
So would you say time and exposure to fearful constructs and fearful situations then would bolster people's resolve to fear? And I'll give you an example of this, right? Everybody here in attendance is of a particular age. I can see the profile pictures, no offence, right? We're all of a particular age. And we've grown up with the likes of the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the mini ice age, the ice caps melting, hole in the ozone layer, terrorist attacks, wars, fatal diseases, illnesses, pandemics, and you name it, we've been exposed to it. So we've developed, like a callous to their modus operandi and the tool which is being discussed, which is being used, which is endorsing a state of fear within the people that are governed by those that are projecting their fear of not having on society.
Well, one thing that comes up, Carl, is the fact that the times when I used to watch TV, it's funny that I say that. Seriously, never thought I'd be saying that in my life, but there you go. I remember that in the morning, turning on the TV, there was the news. And the news usually present all sorts of events that inflict fear in the subconscious. It's all about the deaths, all about the accidents, all about the war over there, the war over there. It's just first thing when we wake up, when people wake up, that are turning on the TV, they pretty much inflict fear within themselves without knowing. Now, does it come up to how aware people are of this kind of manipulation of the mind? Is that something to do with it? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Manipulation of manipulation of the mind. Some form of manipulation of the mind. Well, as we go deeper into understanding our environment, especially in current times, please excuse my chair. We tend to find, if we take a moment and look at the obvious, right? We tend to find that yes, the mind is what did Marius say? The imprisoning of the mind, something like that. Did you just say? Yes, we find that is definitely a key factor, because what we're discovering and what we begin to realize, and what is now what should be obvious but isn't, and I understand why, but is that one of the mechanisms involved is language. Excuse me. And the way in which that language is being utilized the way it's being projected into the consciousness of people. It's a very fascinating dynamic, because if I take myself outside the situation, take a look in, it's like as these people are saying things to these groups of people, it's like Johnny Appleseed just throwing seeds out of his sack, it's landing in the field. And depending on how people respond to what's been said, it depends on how well those seeds have germinated. And when I look at it in that very basic format, it's pretty incredible, because, man, nobody can even find these seeds. People struggle to resist the concepts. They struggle to resist the notions. They struggle to resist the subject matter of these seeds that have been latently just sprinkled. And it just happened to be in earshot, and because you were in earshot, it landed. And you can't see it, you can't smell it, can't taste it, can't touch it. But yet somehow you can struggle with the fact that you're aware of it. You can struggle with the fact that somebody can say a sentence to you, and you can struggle for 10, 15, 20 years because of that sentence that you can't touch, see, taste or smell. You can't feel it. Well, you don't feel it on the physical. And that's the bit. That's why there's this fascination. That's the reason why there is almost this fetish of the way in which there's a fetish behind this control system, because they're clearly acutely aware of that. They're acutely aware of what that does. They're acutely aware of what a word can do. The way it's projected, the tone, the pause. This has been mastered. And we can see how well it's been mastered, because people get into heavy traffic every single day to go to a job that sometimes they do not like. They do not like being in the traffic, and will tell you that they don't like being in traffic, yet every single day they go into the traffic. Doesn't matter if somebody says, yeah, but they need the money. No. Go back to the source. They don't like the traffic, yet they choose to go into the traffic. It's got nothing to do with the job, as people like to assume. It's got nothing to do with that. And that's the bit that these who I feel have they're on the opposing side of this fetish for control. That's what I'm saying. I think these are the people that have mastered it. And on the other side, there are those where those seeds have germinated and are now part of those individuals. And they're the ones that love to control. So they have a fetish for being controlled. So there's a group that have a fetish for controlling, and there's the others that have developed the fetish for being controlled. And then there's the rest of us. Your thoughts, gentlemen. And I wanted to see how much further will we continue on with this particular show, because I'm sure that we didn't discuss it, and my contract says that. No, I'm just kidding.
We have discussed it 2 hours, yeah. So we still have an hour.
Oh yes. Okay, good. You just basically what it was I actually forgot.
It's all right. I was on 90 minutes, Yannick.
That's what I was to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I was on 90 minutes. But while we're here, right? I'd just like to say thank you to Dak, Lu64, I love it, Boots, Standy, Mary, Diane, and Arnie for showing some perseverance and actually sticking through the conversation. I'd like to thank you really from the bottom of my heart, and to each and everybody on behalf of those on stage as well for actually sitting through.
It looks like your screen doesn't show current researcher, so you may have to refresh.
Oh, I've got to pull to refresh. There we go. Yeah, I do apologise. Karen, researcher as well. I've just pulled to refresh. Yes, nothing but love and light to you all. I do apologise.
No, you can't. No, it's too late now. It's too late.
I corrected the problem.
No, you can't correct the problem once it's out the bag. See, that's what people think, man. It's true. Once it's gone, how are you supposed to get it back? It's gone.
I had a pull to refresh. I've learned a lesson. No, next time I do that, I'll pull to refresh before I say anything.
Just kidding. But yes, it's actually been a great outing, first outing on our quest, and we're really happy that you were able to join us and be our first audience. I'm sure we'll hear it in the next. Why couldn't we get on stage, man? What's going on, man? What we trying to do? It wasn't about that, ladies and gentlemen. No, it's just a podcast that we realised that, funnily enough, this would be the best place to actually do it for what we were trying to do. To create it, record it at the same time. We thought this would be the best place to do it. It seems a lot easier. Hit a button, boom, done, and then that's it, finished. So, but hopefully,
Henny, before you even go towards the end, because it looks like you guys already set for 90, so I can hear that. Even though I suggested 2 hours, you guys agreed that now you're going back and it worked. That's interesting. You made a good point. You made a good point about different sides of the fetish of control, right? The ones that they have the need of control, and the others that they have a need to be controlled. And maybe this is the group of people that I think it was you mentioned about the fact, or Carl, the fact of going to these events and asking to do something about that sign, do something about that zebra, do something about that location. It sounds like that need to be controlled.
So that's a good point, Marius, right? And in this conversation, can we surmise in some Socratean style that the root of this fetish for control stems from fear? Are we all in agreement with that?
Yeah, we can definitely agree. We can definitely agree on that.
Well, I'd say, that was a perfectly timed conversation. I don't know about you, Marius, but yeah, I'm pleased. I'm pleased as punch. And again, thank you, Arnie, researcher Karen, Diane, Mary, Sandy, Boots, Lou64, and Dak. Nothing but love and light to you all. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I shall leave it up to these two beautiful souls on where we go next.
Well, I would also want to thank everyone for being here. And would love to hear some feedback from the discussion that you listened to. See if we can learn some more from you as you guys learning from us. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for being here. There you go. Up to you, Henny.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, as always, to be amongst you and to be able to have conversations and go in depth with these two gentlemen here. I feel honoured to be on the same stage. I also feel honoured to see the audience, the majestic audience we have here, the calibre researcher, our governor there at the tavern. Thank you, and Sandy, our enforcer. But yeah, just joking. But all of you, really, thank you for joining us. This is our first one. I'm sure we're going to put the podcast somewhere, and then we'll let you know about it so we can all listen to it at that point again. But yes, I believe we're going to be doing more of this. This should be a weekly or regular thing, because there's plenty going on the planet that we can definitely take a good look at, and with some neutrality and some balance, I think we'll find some answers. So thank you again, gentlemen, for including me in this. It's been an honour. It's been a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard me say now.
The pleasure is mine too, and Henrik and Carl for the next podcast, because where I was thinking of going after Henny's, I was going to ask you both to talk about how the music and the language used in the songs today are also a tool of manipulation of the mind and also inflict fear. But we can discuss more about that in the next podcast.
No worries. And to you, fabulous audible voyeurs, if you've got any subjects that you'd like to hear discussed, feel free to either message myself, Marius, or Yanni on some of the subject matter that you would like to hear. But I dare say, as we've all said our goodbyes, I can thank you from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of everybody here, thank you for showing up. Thank you for listening to our 90-minute conversation. But that's it from us. The After Dark Love and Light show, the Fetish for Control was the subject matter, and this little group is the House of Lords. We should be ending this room in 5, 4, 3, 2.